Genesis chapter 8, verse 2. Let's continue with the process by which God ceases the flood and begins to undo its effects. Ke apekalutheson, he pegai tes abusu, ke hoi kataraktai tu uranu, ke suneskethe ha huetos apa tu uranu. We'll begin here. Notice the Kai is just linking back, continuing the sequence of verbs by which the flood comes to an end. And the first main verb here is from epikalupto. Now, you may be more familiar with the apokalupto verb, like the apocalypse verb, the uncovering. This is, in essence, the opposite. This is to cover or to cover over. And you'll notice there's a theson ending, a little e that snuck in here after the prepositional prefix. Is going to be a third plural aorist passive indicative. So some plural entity is being covered here. And what are those two things? Notice I've tabbed them in just for clarity. You got two different things. First off, you have the pegai, these springs. That's what pegai means. So these springs. And they're the springs of the abusu. That's going to be, of the deeps. This is the water coming up from below that we saw previously in Genesis. And then we also have the kataraktai, which is where we get cataract from, not referring to your eyes necessarily, but to a floodgate or a waterfall. So let's go with floodgate. That seems to work pretty well here. Or the floodgates, plural, the floodgates, and it's of heaven. So now this is the water that was coming down from the heavens. So both of these are now shut up, or if you will, covered up. So you could translate it, the springs of the deep and the waterfalls or floodgates of heaven were closed up or covered over or something like that. The implication here, of course, is that God is the one who is doing it. And then next verb here is suneskethe. This is from sunecho, so it's pretty easy main verb here. You're familiar with echo. If you recall, in the aorist passive and in the future, there are some weird spelling changes, letters flip around and so forth. You got a theta eta ending. This is going to be a third singular aorist passive indicative, so same basic form here, other than the fact that this is a third singular as opposed to third plural. And the nominative here is the huetos. That means rain, and it's from heaven as well. But what does sunecho mean? Of course, echo is pretty straightforward. I looked it up. This is in the Lust Einical Housepi lexicon. You'll notice there's a bunch of different meanings here: to confine, to shut up, to hold together, to be straightened, to be constrained, etc. In the passive. The basic idea here is that the rain from heaven was, shut up. It was constrained. It was held fast, something like that by God. In other words, it's no longer raining. And now the sense here is that we know from Genesis 7 that essentially the rain from above and the waters bursting forth from below took place over a 40-day period. And then for another 110 days, you have that water just pressing down on the earth all the way up to a certain distance above the tallest mountain. And so most likely this whole verse is pointing back to a period in time in which the actual rain stopped, but you still have the flood that is overpowering the earth. So it's kind of a retrospective look back at the time when the water stopped flowing from the cataracts, from the sort of chambers beneath the earth, so forth, but the waters were still on the earth. We'll see what happens to the rest of the water here in the subsequent verses. This is a good reminder, though, that back in Genesis 7, verses 11 through 12, this is where we actually have the description, where you have the fountains or the springs of the great deep. The abyss had burst open, so that's the pegai, the abusu. You have the floodgates of the heavens, the kataraktai of heaven. You got the rain coming here. So all that vocabulary that we see in this verse are going back to Genesis 7. So God is now undoing what he had done previously to bring the flood to a conclusion. So that brings us to the end of Genesis 8, verse 2.